start with Final Fantasy X. Now before you go and boot the game up, I'm going to tell you what to expect whenever you hit new game. Now we're going to take it step by step, and I'm going to tell you how to play it and just about any other game in the series. And I'm also going to give you the best walkthrough I've ever found for the game, and tell you what to play after you finish this game based on what you liked about Final Fantasy X. This is the video to watch if you want to get into the Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy X is a good midway point between the classic ATB or active time battle, turn-based battle systems, and the modern action-based combat systems. Love Pokemon? Turn-based battling is for you. Love Zelda? Action-based combat is your path. Now I love both, so you'll have to go through and find out which one you like more. With that said, it is technically still turn-based, meaning everyone in a battle gets a turn similar to a game of chess or checkers, and the order of turns is based off specific things that we'll get into later. But in this game, you can see whose turn is coming up next on this handy meter up here. Take note that there are a few things that can alter this meter and bring your character's turns ahead of the enemies. Things like the magic spell known as Haste, that boosts the speed of a character. Even though it is turn-based, it's still fairly decently paced, although if you're used to action-based combat, this might feel a little slow for you. And I would still recommend this game first before anything else. Knowing what you like and don't like in this game can pretty much tell you what to play after this, and we're gonna get into that in just a bit. The story of Final Fantasy X is a solid B+ for me personally, having some very heavy themes interspersed all throughout, and featuring some solid characters that each bring their own flavors to the table. Sometimes it's a little cheesy and over the top.
Right, whatever.
Sometimes you're right in the world with the character, experiencing everything that they are in real time. It's a good balance. Even though this game isn't among my favorites in the series, it's still a wonderful starting point when you have no clue where to go with so many titles to choose between. The beginning of the game, as with most anything else, is a little slow, but this is necessary to bring you into the world without completely bombarding you. Even if you're not digging the first few parts of the game, just try to get through it enough to take control of a full party of 3, and start learning abilities and get new equipment for that party. Speaking of that, let me tell you how to play before you just dive in. Playing a Final Fantasy game is fairly straightforward. You'll be controlling a character in what's called the field map, examining things, finding treasure, and talking to people with a button press. Depending upon what type of field you're in, you can get into a random battle. Not all Final Fantasies have random battles, but this one does. And if you get into one, don't panic. I'm absolutely gonna walk you through your first battle, don't worry about it. So immediately you see your characters on one side of the screen and the enemies on the other side. They might attack you first, and if that happens, it's okay. Let them. You're about to tear them to shreds. So a menu will pop up with some commands. For the example of this fight, if you hit the same button you examine things in the field with, known as the accept button, you'll basically tell the game that you choose to fight. But now you have to choose which enemy to fight. If you were hit first by an enemy earlier, use the D-pad or analog stick to target that sorry little walnut, and press the accept button to execute your attack. Congrats, you've officially got a battle going. This will be mostly how your battles go throughout the entire series. Mowing down enemies to get through battles to continue exploration, and battling is important. It's the primary source of improving your character's strength, and one of the sources of gaining currency. Sometimes, however, usually story-driven, there is what's called a boss battle. These guys are usually ultra strong and require some strategy. Continue on attacking those enemies until you cleared the map of them all. Oh, it looks like you gained a level. Or in this game's case, an S level or sphere level. So when you're able to, hop into your menu and... Alright, I know that it seems like there's a lot of choices, but let's look at it logically. Remember, I just said you gained a sphere level, so let's choose Sphere Grid. Here's where you learn abilities and increase your attributes like strength and defense. This game pretty much runs you through the sphere grid step by step, so I won't go over it again. But later on you'll have some split paths where you can decide which technique you want to learn and all that, but for now, this is the basic function of it. Back on the main menu screen, you can see your character's information over to the left. HP is the numerical value of your health. MP is your magic points needed to cast spells, and that's about it for right now. If you're low on health, you can use an item like a potion to heal yourself. But for now, press cancel to get back to the field map, and now I have to congratulate you. See, you've ultimately just learned how nearly every menu-based Final Fantasy game goes. None of the other Final Fantasy games have the sphere grid, but it's all essentially the same. In the earlier games, your characters will automatically learn spells and techniques, so you have a little less control over what happens. A quick word about stats and attributes. Earlier I mentioned raising defense and increasing strength. In most RPGs, everything has numerical value, and when you get into a battle like you did earlier and attack an enemy, Basically, this is what happened. If you go into your menu and go down to status and hit the accept button, choose a character and press accept again, you'll be greeted with a lot of numbers. Each of these are your character's attributes. So when you attack an enemy physically with a weapon, your character's base strength is up against an enemy's base defense. Things like agility, luck, evasion all play a role in any items left over by the enemies after battles in the form of spoils, whose turn comes up first in the handy little meter I mentioned earlier. Notice there is a magic defense and magic stat. Those work in the same way as strength and defense, but with spells. Things like elemental damage come into play. Think back to the wonderful game of rock, paper, scissors, if you will. Paper beats rock, but loses to scissors. The same thing happens with a fire spell being weak against water, but strong against ice. If you're a Pokemon fan, you know this system quite well. So covering some basic abilities you can learn, as far as magic goes, black magic is offensive magic. Think things like fire and ice, anything that does damage. White magic spells are defensive spells and can heal your character's HP in and outside of battle. In this game, the character Yuna is a summoner, so she can control these giant creatures called Aeons. Once an Aeon is summoned, you can control it just like you control any other character in battle. In other Final Fantasy games, summoning isn't quite this expansive. You summon a creature, it swoops in and does something and then it leaves. That's it. Not here though. For a brief moment, you can tell it what to do, and I love that. Also, you'll notice the more you get into the series that some of the fans in the series can be a bit passionate, but I don't want that to deter you. It's easy to get caught up in some of the negativity that can come with any fandom, but I'll say this too. For every one negative fan, there are 10 fans who want you to love the series as much as they do. And also, something to remember. If this game didn't resonate with you, and you're just not into the series, that's totally okay. You gave it an honest shot, and that's something positive to take away. So now you've got the absolute basics down and want to give the game a shot. Let me show you the best walkthrough I've ever found for it, just in case you want to 100% the game, and not only see the end credits, but everything this game has to offer. If you're playing this game on a modern console, which I assume you are, I would personally choose the walkthrough by Paramina, as it not only covers the base game, but the more advanced international version, which is ultimately the HD remake. This game is on a ton of different consoles, ranging from the old PS2 to Nintendo Switch and everything in between. So choose your guide accordingly. There's a link to it in the description of this video. Take note though that Final Fantasy X is still Final Fantasy X. The only real differences lies within the sphere grid itself. All through your Final Fantasy X playthrough, you might be struck with some absolutely gorgeous music, or maybe some amazing battle themes. You can thank composer Nobuo Uematsu for that. He composed everything from Final Fantasy I, and he still does some music for the games now, although not as much. This whole series is renowned for its soundtracks, and while this one isn't my absolute favorite, I do have some tracks that I absolutely adore, and here are 3 of them. Silence Before the Storm. This is my favorite song in the whole game. I just love the way the music flows and the chords change into something almost melancholy. To Xenarkand, which is the very first song you hear in the game, and Lulu's theme. Now while I get to what game you should play after you finish Final Fantasy X, go ahead and leave me a comment and tell me what your favorite game soundtrack is, or just a few of your favorite songs. Since this game is a good midway point in the series, if you enjoy the turn-based combat and want to experience some of the most classic games in the series, including my personal favorite Final Fantasy VI, then you can start making your way through the earlier games. I would recommend either 6 or 7. But if you want more customization than you got in FF10, you can either check out Final Fantasy V or 3. These games have what's called a job system, where you can freely let any character become any job or class and learn any abilities. You can also absolutely play through the series in order, starting from Final Fantasy I if you want. And if you do that, I would recommend getting the Pixels remasters for at least the first 3. To me, it's the best way to experience the earliest phase in the series and play them all in sort of a modern and cohesive way. However, if you want more action-based combat with quicker pacing, I would say move immediately to Final Fantasy 13 or 15. 12 is good, but it's an oddball of the series, utilizing what I would call action-based turn-based combat. It plays more like an MMO like World of Warcraft than a typical RPG, and if MMOs are your thing, this series has 2 of them, 11 and 14. 14 is insanely popular right now, and I'm actually getting into it myself. Fun fact, Final Fantasy X was series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi's last full Final Fantasy game that he was a part of. At this point, he had been the primary force behind the series since its birth in 1987, around 14 years before this game was released. The absolute box office flop Final Fantasy The Spirits Within was ultimately to blame. Now there's a lot of gray area here as far as what exactly happened, but Sakaguchi felt like he had done the series a huge disservice, and he stepped down. Not long after that, composer Nobuo Uematsu left to become essentially a freelance composer, and a lot of the original team at Square, the company that makes the Final Fantasy series, left with Sakaguchi to form his own company called Mistwalker, which made games like Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon and the recent RPG Fantasian for Apple Arcade. Did you know that the Final Fantasy series is kind of like a sandwich? Go ahead and check out this video, it's the dumbest thing I've ever made.